All right. I think now, we're 6 minutes in. We can definitely start. Again, I'd like to welcome you all to the Green Home NYC event, Green Careers, specifically on recycling and waste. Today, we have a couple of speakers. We do have one speaker who had to drop out due to some personal issues, but sends regards and has worked with one of the speakers, so has asked one of the speakers to give a little bit of an update on what it is that they do. So today we have, sort of going alphabetical, Anna Sachs, who's one of our speakers, and we have Sarah Bloomquist as well. Today they're going to give us initially just a little bit of background on their career, their progression, sort of any schooling that they've done, where they work currently, sort of what their day-to-day looks like. And then once we sort of cover that, we'll move into some general questions, and then we'll sort of end it with open questions for all of the participants. So with that being said, Sarah, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. Thanks for the introduction, Lou. Happy to be here with everyone. Hope everyone's having a good, gloomy, humid Tuesday in New York. But yeah, my name's Sarah Bloomquist. Happy to be here today to speak with everyone about my career in waste and recycling and the path I followed. I currently work at TOMRA. It's a Norwegian company that I would be surprised most people are not familiar with. But if you have ever taken a bottle or can into a store for a deposit and put it in a machine and gotten the little receipt back for the money, those are usually TOMRA machines. So that's on the collection side of our business. And then we also have the technology where all of the recycling goes. So everything you put in your blue bin for recycling goes to the Sims MRF in Brooklyn if you live in New York City. And it's an awesome place to tour. If you haven't gone, you should look them up, Sims MRF, and they do really cool tours, virtual now, but you can do it in person. And yeah, our technology is there, and it's basically sorting the curbside recycling stream so that plastic number 1 goes this way and number 2 goes that way, and can make it to an end market, get baled and go to an end market. So that's our company in a nutshell. I'm in the government affairs team, and I joined there about a year and a half ago. My current focus is largely on advancing extended producer responsibility policy and recycled content policy. So trying to drive closed loop recycling. EPR, some of you may be familiar, but most people know it more for difficult to recycle items like mattresses, batteries, paint. It's more common to have programs like that. But we're seeing a real push right now at the state level to have EPR for packaging. So all that stuff that goes in the curbside, getting producers responsible for paying for and or managing that so we can improve recycling rates, which you may know has been a bit of a downward trend since China stopped taking a lot of our recyclable material. So anyway, I'll try not to lecture too much on that. But so yeah, that's my current role at TOMRA. Before this, I was at Rubicon. Their tagline is I think it was, what was it, like the Uber of waste was one way they were described, that people may know them. But I was on the Smart Cities team, where it was a platform that cities would buy for their municipal fleet, so they could gather data on that fleet and try to optimize it and basically bring these very antiquated operations, into a more modern way that they could manage their routes better, find out about recycling data and metrics. And so I'm kind of going backwards from where I am now and how I got there. So the way I got to Rubicon, I would say, is through, it's called the Circular Economy Network, CEN, which I created with a friend and professional colleague that I met through going to trash events, kind of like this, but it was for zero waste guidelines put on by the Architecture Association in New York City. So we saw a real need to have cross-sector collaboration, and she and I started the Circular Economy Network and put on about 8 events over a few years, where it was anyone who was interested in Circular Economy Network to come listen to panels on different events from data, data management, different ways of supply chain, just really anything in the circular economy. And through that, one of the first speaker I had an event ended up being my boss at Rubicon. So I think that just really goes to show, you know, when you kind of create something you're interested in or get involved with something that you're interested in, it can lead to good things in the end. So let's see, before that, I studied at the City College of New York, CCNY, and that's where I got my master's in sustainability. It was about 5 years ago, and what led me to that is I was working in IT operations as a project manager, and although I enjoyed my team, the work itself didn't speak real strongly to me. I knew I was interested in the environment and sustainability, so I researched a few programs, also the one at Columbia, and sat in on a few classes, and ended up choosing CCNY, yeah, for a variety of reasons, but it's definitely less money than Columbia, being honest. So I did that program, and it was great. Met so many interesting folks, you know, from New York, but it's a huge international student body too, so it was really fun. Got to travel to Haiti through that program with one of my teachers and a colleague, which was an amazing experience. I really knew nothing about Haiti, and I was there for only a short time, so I didn't get to see much of the country, but just a really awesome opportunity for me personally and professionally to be able to travel there as we were trying to research an eco-industrial park. So in my studies there, my final project, my thesis was on a small scale waste to energy project. It was a team project that we did, and that I would say is what, within sustainability, that's when I started to get on the trash and the waste and recycling path. There's one of the classes you can take at City College's a waste and recycling class, and through that I got interested to pursue it further. And in this final project, basically I ended up learning more about the City of New York's sustainability plan, and within that the zero waste goal, which now has been around for a few years and has been revised, but originally it was the zero by 30 goal. And in researching, you know, the city's sustainability plan and the waste goals, I got connected to the local community of people who were interested in waste management and recycling, and it just spoke to me, and I got further involved in that community. So another group is the SWABs. Some folks may know the Solid Waste Advisory Boards. So there's one in Manhattan. The ones in Manhattan and Brooklyn are strongly active, and Queens now just started maybe 2 or 3 years ago at this point. And Bronx is the kind of the brand new one. I think it's only been a year, and there's not one in Staten Island I'm aware of, but they're basically in the borough. Anyone can go to the meetings. They're open to the public. It's everyone from just interested community residents, basically people in industry. So if you're interested in the topic, I highly recommend you seeking those out and attending their meetings. You know, obviously they're virtual now, so it's easy. But yeah, I got heavily involved with that, and eventually I was a member at first and then ran for the chair of the board, which for me professionally, again, was a good opportunity to kind of put myself out there in a new role, challenge myself for something I wasn't used to, a little out of my comfort zone. But again, it was a great experience to get further enmeshed in waste and recycling, and kind of some of who the players were and what the hot topics are in New York, which at Brooklyn SWAB is largely organics. That's probably one of the biggest, most popular topics is organics collection, keeping organics out of landfill. I'm trying to see my time. Okay, so I'll go through a couple more things just to give you a picture of some other relevant involvements I've had that brought me here. So GreenHomeNYC, I don't think I even mentioned, I used to volunteer for GreenHomeNYC also. I was on the forums committee and put on events similar to this one, not careers, but the forums team. And it's an awesome way to get involved. If you're looking for a career change, if you're not, it's just a great way to connect with like-minded folks, even just, you know, to find people who are interested in the same topics as you, but also it gives you an established platform and venue to reach out and connect with other people and just kind of build your network, but in a fun and friendly way. It's not like I feel like networking can be a kind of cold or scary thing, but GreenHomeNYC is all good stuff, and everyone there is yeah, just interested to learn about sustainability and connect people. So highly recommend that. Some other things I've done in the waste world too. I started a blog called Bronzicorn, which I have not touched in a few years, but back when I was more getting grounded in my career, when I was in school and kind of getting enmeshed in the waste world and figure out where I was going, it was a great way for me to just get some ideas out there and, you know, have a way that people could come check me out beyond LinkedIn, I guess. One thing I like to do whenever I travel is take photos of trash bins anywhere I go. That's my little dorky trash thing. So I have a collection of waste bins from around the States and around the world that one of these days I will compile them all and give an analysis of how there's so much variability of how we sort, how we think of trash, how we sort trash, how it is in the public space. So that's kind of an interest of mine. So yeah, I used to have a calendar where I would post events all the time, and a lot of people would come check it out for waste and sustainability events in New York City. So I might revisit that soon once I have more free time, but this job is pretty demanding. So I don't have as much time to do the Circular Economy Network, the Bronzicorn blog. Those are kind of back burner for now until I need them again. And then I guess the other kind of bucket of experience that I think is relevant and interesting is volunteering, right? Not just our paid work, of course, but what are these things that are interesting to us that might have to do with waste or just something totally random and still can be great ways to connect with people in the city. And you never know those second or third degree connections that can be interesting. I volunteered at the Zero Waste Conference in Austin. I think that was 5 years ago now. And, you know, I think I had to put out some money to get down there and everything. So it wasn't, it was me and kind of investing in myself, really. It was volunteer. They weren't paying me and I had to pay to go, but it was totally worth it because I connected with so many people in the field, learned about different types of careers and businesses. And I think there's the folks who put on the Zero Waste Conference, I think that has now come under the umbrella of the Green Building Council, or I forget. There's an organization I think that they're now under the umbrella of. But yeah, in that same line too, just volunteering. There's so many great opportunities in New York through New York Cares, not just sustainability, like I said, but tutoring. I did SAT math tutoring just to kind of keep myself sharp and help out kids give back to the community. You know, as a professional myself, wanted to help other kids kind of get a foot ahead. And then last but not least, the formal education, of course, that helps. I mean, I think definitely you can build your pathway without a super formal education. Doesn't have to be, you know, the best school and the longest schooling, but it definitely helps. It helps to connect with people at your school. Some schools are going to have better networking opportunities and what's the word, alumni connections than others. So that's, it could be important. You know, you just have to weigh if that's how critical that is to you and how that helps you. But I do have 2 master's degrees because I love school, and if someone would pay me, I would just go to school all the time. But yeah, the master's in sustainability, and then I also got my master's in international business in France while I was living there for a couple of years. So that's been very helpful to me to have kind of these complementary degrees in many ways. A business degree, you know, can be applied to many things. It was a general degree, just like my sustainability degree. So I'm one of those jack of all trades, becoming a master in sustainability and waste. So, oh, and then last but not least, PMP. So I have my project management professional certification. I got that I think 7 or so years ago when my company sponsored it. So that would be a bit of advice too, you know, always reach out to if you're currently working, ask your boss if they'll cover training for you, whatever it is. If they'll cover it, you might as well get trained in something because it's free training and it's always helpful. It's to have that little thing that can set you apart. And specifically, if you do like project management, PMP is the gold standard. And although the test is quite tedious and the studying is quite tedious, I think it's really helpful. It's a really helpful thing to have, and you can adapt it to a lot of industries, as long as you don't mind studying crazy thick book about project management. So yeah, I think that kind of covered all the main things I was asked to go through, but looking forward to hear from Anna as well, and open to any questions or ways I can help folks.
No, thank you so much. That was great, very thorough. It's clear that you have a wealth of experience, and you've sort of done a little bit of everything, as you say. But I would definitely not call you a jack of all trades. Definitely a master. And that would be great if you could, while Anna's speaking, maybe share some of the links to some of the networks like CEN and SWAB. That would be amazing, and some
Sure.
things that people could be doing here. I just want to make a quick note about your hobby in photography and taking photos. I myself have become very fascinated with waste collectors, those people who are just sort of roaming the streets of Brooklyn, Manhattan, and removing trash. It's also an informal economy, but it's also, I think, really important to understand that this thing that I'm holding now, once I put it in the bin, what life does it have afterwards? Because it clearly does have a life. It's not just an object. There's more to it. So that I would really hope you can do something with that in the future. That would be really interesting. So it would be a great tool, I think, for activism and sort of sharing what's happening. So thank you very much for that lovely introduction. I will hand it off to Anna.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anna. I use she, her pronouns, and I'll go back to, I guess, college, post-college. I don't use anything related to my major, which was East Asian languages and cultures. I think it's in general, like, very hard to find something related to your major that you then make a career out of, at least in like a liberal arts context. And afterwards, I was really trying to figure out what to do. And so I was actually also into photography. I tried interning at a gallery, and I found it to be more of like an administrative thing and not really something like more of you're selling a high-end commodity, which is versus like the art aspect of it, which is what I was interested in. I then went to an investment bank and I worked there for a couple of years. And that was a very difficult work-life balance. It was an imbalance because that's just like the industry, the financial industry and the corporate industry. It's long hours and good high compensation, but I found it was a big personal cost for me. And then I was looking for something to do and found this program called Adama, which is earth or ground in Hebrew. And it's a 3-month farming fellowship in rural Connecticut that combines Judaism and Jewish learning and intentional living and intentional community and farming and kind of sustainability education. And I did that program and stayed on afterwards. And when I came back to the city, I was born and raised in New York City, I was trying to do something related to compost afterwards, because that's really the process that I loved when I was at Adama. It really resonated with me, the turning food scraps into a soil amendment. So I was teaching after school Hebrew and then looking for jobs and trying to build a resume so that I could get a job. I took the Master Composter program at the Lower East Side Ecology Center, which was suspended due to COVID budget cuts, and now it's being restored, thankfully. And that I really recommend that if you're interested in composting, and I met great people there. I started volunteering with Rescuing Leftover Cuisine, which is a food rescue nonprofit. I also did volunteering with New York Cares and volunteered sometimes at Big Reuse, which is a community compost site, and then Lower East Side Ecology Center, which is like another community compost site, and like they have a park stewardship program where on Saturday mornings you could help like weed and take care of the park there. I started then documenting my trash stuff on Instagram as another way, under the trash walker, as another way to give myself relevant experience. And then another thing that I did a lot of was email and outreach and trying to get coffee with people, trying to get lunch with people, learning about their careers, learning about what they like and didn't like, putting myself out there. And that was it. So all of my career moves have been through personal connections, actually, which I think is like very common. And sometimes it's a strained personal connection, and sometimes it's like a more close one. And it just so happened that one of my friends knew someone who was in the sustainability world, and then put me in contact with him, and we got coffee. And then I told him like all about my interests, and then he passed on my information to Think Zero, which is where I then ended up working for 3 years, which is a waste reduction and diversion consulting firm. And so I think a lot of times that sort of happens of you have like letting yourself, vocalizing that this is something that you're really interested in, letting everyone know about it as much as possible, and then trying to meet people in that industry so that you can, like, when there is a job opening, they know who you are and they can like either recommend or not recommend you. But when I was unemployed, and working as the after school Hebrew and doing all the other things, I applied for a job at the Department of Sanitation. And at the Lower East Side Ecology Center, someone from the Department of Sanitation came and spoke during the Master Composter course and mentioned casually that like, oh, someone is starting in this new role soon. And so like, we're going to have more help with this. And I hadn't heard back from my application that the job was filled. I checked online, the job posting was still up. It didn't come down yet. And I then spoke with her afterwards, the person, just to confirm, and she was like, yes, it's that role, and asked for my name. And like, my name didn't even register with her because she was like, we got 800 applications for this one position. And I think that's kind of the situation, unfortunately, of you're one of so many people. And that's why the personal connections are really important. So like, and I've had many friends also who have been successful in transitioning careers and getting jobs through reaching out on LinkedIn, finding person's email online, sending a very short personalized email asking for take them out to coffee. I guess it's a little bit tricky now, but still you could have asked for like a informal phone call. And then through that, over time, being able to transition careers. Maybe that doesn't work out, but maybe they know someone else who's able to make another introduction and so forth. So I was at Think Zero for 3 years, which is, as I mentioned, is a waste reduction and diversion consulting firm, which is basically exactly what I wanted to be doing. We worked with corporations and real estate owners on everything with waste. That means we do a lot of tracking of their waste data. We do trainings about recycling and composting, waste audits where we sort through the building's trash and recycling, and then produce a comprehensive report. We do some certifications also. And while I was there, just to mention certifications, I got the zero waste certification. It's called True, and it's by the same people who do LEED, US GRESB. And so that's another thing to look into is certifications. I think it's more those, I wouldn't say that like, I would say it's an added benefit to have one of those to show like some sort of qualification, but it's not in my opinion like totally necessary for a job. And sometimes once you get a job, you can get the certification. And then now I'm kind of doing my own thing. I'm working on Save Our Compost Coalition, which is about New York City composting, and specifically the public funds for composting and community composting sites. And I'm working on federal legislation related to Donate, Don't Dump, which is making it so that corporations have a very clear incentive to donate their excess unwanted inventory rather than destroying it, which is the default for a lot of corporations right now. and I'm helping with move outs or clean outs of apartments and learning a little bit more about that process. And I kind of view this as, and I'm continuing my social media stuff. And I view this a little bit, I didn't get a master's. And so this I kind of view as a sort of self-guided master's program. Like I have books that I want to read, I have things that I want to do. And I was just thinking about, is there a way for me to take some time and learn the things that I want to learn and do the things that I want to do without being in a formal education environment and having to pay that tuition or accruing that student debt. And so that's kind of where I am right now. Yeah, so I would say my biggest overall advice really is like the coffee, asking people to coffee, asking people for phone calls, and making it very clear like this is something that you're interested in. And sometimes those connections can then come from unexpected places, but you're putting yourself in a position where you could be then like a legitimate hire, because while you're waiting for the job that you want, you're doing other things to build your resume. And I think definitely volunteering and joining relevant groups is a great way also to enter this field. And I'll stop it there.
Thank you so much, Anna. That's great. You know, it's clearly obvious that both you and Sarah have sort of different paths, but both in the sphere. You're both doing what you are passionate about. You've taken maybe a little more hands-on approach, which might be what some of the participants here and others who might be watching this later on want to do, as opposed to the more formal education or more formal education where you get certificates because you're inclined that way. And I think it's really important. And I would love if you could share some of these links, because I myself am interested. I would love to see what you're doing on Instagram. I think it's a really powerful tool, especially for younger generations, but not only. So yes, thank you so much for that. And we'll continue speaking, but in the meantime, best of luck with your new endeavors. So we had some other questions that both of you have sort of hit on, which was like, what type of recommendations would you have? What type of things do you think beyond education are useful? And both of you have mentioned volunteering, you've mentioned networking, you've mentioned just putting yourself out there. So, I guess if you want, we can sort of hit on a topic that might be on many people's mind. It definitely is on my mind. It's something that I started thinking about a lot when we started this pandemic. There were certain articles that said, nature is having a moment to breathe. But then at the same time, we also started seeing a lot of increase in single-use plastics, with masks, with gloves, all of that stuff, whether it came from medical professionals directly or it came from individuals. So that's sort of a little intro, and maybe Sarah, you want to tackle this first, and then hear from Anna as well. What would you say are some of the challenges and successes, to keep it positive, because I'm sure there are some, as a result of COVID for your field? Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be your workplace. Maybe you don't want to share that, but just what you think your industry is doing.
Well, we were protected as an essential business, so that kept things running basically. That there was, still the need to. So basically, one way that it was especially essential was in supply chain. So the industry was pointing out, if we don't get these materials back for recycling, we don't just recycle for fun. Like, there's a reason that these materials come back and get turned into new things. So if you don't support this industry during COVID, the supply chain will be hurt. And we've seen that. I mean, even with recycling continuing in general, let's say, there's been a lot of different supply chain challenges. Mm-hmm. If you talk to people who are trying to build homes or repair homes, like the price of lumber has gone up. Cars right now are crazy because, it's like the chips aren't there. So anyway, that's kind of like tangent stuff, but supply chain issue is relevant.
Yeah. We're experiencing that in the solar industry, and with all sorts of materials. Yeah,
Yeah,
plastic is a big
totally.
one. PVC is a huge one, actually.
Yeah, another thing I was going to say too was under COVID, because there was such a huge concern for health and safety, obviously, and hygiene and sanitation, there was a push from industry against bans. So for instance, like single-use plastics, bags, utensils, stuff like that, where there was some progress being made on bans like that, industry was able to turn the conversation and say, you know, we need these things for health and safety. Like we can't ban plastic bags or single-use utensils because it'll keep everyone safe. So it's like, you know, it just resonated probably with a lot of people more in a way that it didn't necessarily need to. Like you can still reuse things and have them be sanitary and safe. So it was kind of a crappy, that's one negative thing that happened from it, I think, is that there was some delays or stalls on some of this more progressive plastic policy. But on, you know, then the flip side of the coin is that hopefully too, there's more awareness, like when that stuff happens too, I think there's more awareness about plastic pollution specifically now in the last couple of years. And it's hard to tell if it's just because I'm in the industry, but it just seems like more people are aware of pollution and plastic and waste and recycling issues than they were before. So I think that's kind of a benefit. And I mentioned the Chinese sword before. I have no idea who knows that about that or not, but that was basically like China restricting what trash or what recyclables, what materials they would take in. It was effectively a ban because they set the contamination, the allowed contamination rate was so tiny that it effectively banned all these materials. So all these materials that were being collected to be recycled, and the lower value ones were being shipped to China to be recycled. But when they set their policy that they wouldn't accept them, you know, now here in the US, what do we do with that? So we don't yet, we have, you know, relatively speaking, we have pretty decent systems compared globally, but there's huge room for improvement. We only recycle, I think it's like 9 or 10% of plastics. So that happened before COVID, but then those two things together, like city budgets, a lot of cities had to either reduce the materials that they were accepting in their curbside programs, or some of them had to suspend or cancel their programs altogether because they didn't have the money for it. Like there was no end market for a lot of these materials. And that's, you know, what my company, what we're trying to do is make sure that there's the appropriate policy, that the demand is there for these materials. So if we have high recycled content targets and say, you know, all soda bottles have to be 50% recycled plastic, and if it's the law that companies have to do that, it's going to create the demand for that material throughout the system. So yeah, a couple different forces in play.
Yeah, no, definitely. Policy is always going to be a big force. And, you know, social media and media in general. I think, you know, a few documentaries come out recently that, due to Netflix and being a very global streaming service, has brought a lot of light to, you know, stuff that the industry experts have known for a while, or those within sustainability or really focused on climate change. But as we know, it's also the drive happens from the individual to sort of push the bigger picture along. You know, the corporations sort of will react as people sort of say, and then policy sort of reinforces that. So I'm glad to hear that, you know, you've had some, you've seen it as positive and negatives, and that your business specifically was considered essential, because it definitely is. So thank you for that. Anna, we'd love to hear from you, you know, some positive and negatives of COVID as it relates to recycling and waste, maybe, you know, more focused on compost, but I'll let you decide.
Yeah, so in terms of Think Zero's work, well, all of our stuff mostly like related to offices was suspended. So obviously we weren't doing any waste audits. We did some virtual trainings, but it was also kind of, no one was at the offices. And so that whole line of work was paused. Related to composting, New York City faced a huge budget deficit as a result of COVID. And last year there was a big budget fight about how are we going to allocate our taxpayer dollars. And composting was completely eliminated from the mayor's budget. So that was funding for zero waste school education, funding for the curbside brown bin compost collection in New York City, funding for the different green markets, for the local community nonprofits that form the compost project that process the food scraps locally. So that was eliminated, and through a bunch of us organizations formed a coalition called Save Our Compost, and we were able to restore 2.86 million. Of the original budget was 28 million around, so around a tenth was restored, and that funding enabled the green markets to return. So the food scrap drop-off sites at the green markets. So if you've saved your food scraps and brought them to a green market, that's publicly funded, and that funding wouldn't have been there if not for like this coalition. And it was one of the only budget cuts that was reversed, that and summer youth employment program. And it was one of the most called about issues to council members. So number one issue was summer youth employment program, and then number two was about composting. And I think that was really important. We had people calling and tweeting and posting on social media and emailing at like everything. And it wouldn't have happened without that big public outcry. And now it's because of federal money, New York City is going to be reinstating the brown bin program this fall. So something to keep your eye on. I would say, so that was in terms of New York City composting, and then Think Zero. And I want to echo the point of the plastic industry, though. The plastic industry, I think, has done a really good job saying that our products, our single-use disposable plastic products, are inherently safer than any other products, which is not true. They've really pushed that narrative, and it's been successful. And it's been, I mean, I think that we can all think about instances where we use reusables and we don't question the hygiene of them. If you go to a restaurant that's a sit-down restaurant, that's likely you have reusables. You know, in surgery, certain tools that the surgeon uses are reusable too. They get, you know, sanitized in between. When you're at the dentist, there are certain things that are reusable that get sanitized again. So it's the idea that plastic is clean, which is also like, that's not true. It's just not true that plastic is inherently more sanitary, or that single-use products are more sanitary than reusable products. It's all about how were they stored, what were the cleaning processes, like that's really where the sanitation comes in. But it's been a huge setback, I think, in terms of reusables specifically. Reusables in restaurants, reusables accepted in restaurants and accepted in other places. It's been a setback also in terms of the timeline for the commercial waste zones in New York City. It's been a setback in terms of the timeline for the plastic bag ban in New York City. It's been a setback in terms of the compost mandates for New York City, so that certain businesses are required to compost, but at the same time, because of COVID-related hardship, Department of Sanitation is really not issuing any tickets, any summons, any violations. And so that means that the restaurants and grocery stores and, you know, all the places that need to be composting by law are mostly not composting, and they're not being penalized for it. So I would say that COVID overall has been I think it's been a huge setback in terms of legislation, in terms of funding, in terms of prioritizing reusables, prioritizing sustainability, because we've been thinking very health and safety has been of the utmost priority, but then health and safety which was, I think, warped through the plastic industry of saying that like, this is how you are healthy and safety through our products. So I think COVID has been it's been there's going to be a lot of recovery. I hope that we can like pick back up where we left off versus like regressing.
Yeah, no, of course. No doubt that policy and budgets have definitely, as a result of COVID, have done some damage. I am glad to hear that myself, along with many others who were part of the public outcry to get the composting back, that has happened. So in a way, I don't know if it was COVID that helped that or just the general social justice uprising of the United States. Maybe in conjunction with COVID and sort of being at home to educate yourself a little bit more has helped. And I think that will drive a lot of policy as things move forward. And, with someone like yourself sort of leading coalitions like this or being a part of a coalition, I have no doubt that change will happen. So don't want to be all too negative, but I will also, be a realist and agree with you that a lot has been pushed back. Yeah, thank you both for that insight. It was great to hear. So I had, a question, and if you don't feel that you can answer that, that's fine. You just let me know. I was wondering, New York City, right? We're 8+ million people, the largest city of the U.S. and comparable to a lot of other big metropolises, across the world. What do you see as the future for New York City in terms of recycling and waste? And do you think we're leading in any way? And if we're not leading, what other cities would you say are? And you could give us models. Either of you can take it away.
I'll go. I might forget. I feel like there's a couple different questions in there, but
go whatever you remember is fine.
The compost organics component that Anna was speaking to and that she was so heavily involved in. So Catherine Garcia, who was running for mayor, was the commissioner of sanitation, right? And under her, I believe she had said, oh God, I forget now, but basically we have recycling is mandated in the city, and to have organics added to that, I should know this. I'm forgetting now what the timeline is or the projected timeline for getting that. It's not something that is set to happen.
There is none.
Right. But like that happening, I think is really critical because, roughly a third, whatever, quarter to a third or more of the waste stream is organics. And, to Anna's point, there's so many people that are passionate about it. And it seems like it's something a little easier to grasp in some ways than like recycling metals and glass and plastics, because for some people, I mean, it's hard in New York, but if you have like a backyard, it's something you can do on your own. And it's an amazing thing to do. So I think I'm hopeful that will happen. I don't have any idea when, but I think that's going to be a huge thing for the city. But I mean, one good thing with the city is because of our density, because of our population size and our density, that we collect and recycle a lot more materials in our program than most cities do. So cartons, for instance, most locations don't accept, those milk cartons, but we have the volume that we can do that. Sims also, they're like a metals management company, so they're very good at getting metals out, which is excellent. And a lot of other materials that just other programs don't accept. Like New York City accepts all rigid plastics. So that's good. There's room for improvement, but that's kind of like EPR that I was talking about before. I think hopefully we can get an EPR bill soon that will help fix that more materials will be accepted and that producers will be paying somewhat for it and or responsible to some extent, so that there's an incentive for them to use better materials and products, so they use less packaging, and that the packaging they do use can be recycled. It isn't toxic, it's not screwing up the system. Inks and labels on things and fasteners and caps, all these things have repercussions in the recycling system. So EPR, in Maine just today, the first bill for EPR for packaging passed, the first bill that we have in the US at all. So wow. Europe already has this, most provinces in Canada, and now the first state, Maine. It's not a huge state, but it's a start. In Oregon will potentially be wait, I'm sorry, did they just pass it? I'm forgetting. It might be messing up the Oregon one, but yes, Maine signed theirs today, and Oregon, I think, is set to sign theirs any day. So other cities, I think California is probably more advanced on organics. I think they have mandates. Anna, you're probably more of an expert on that, so I'll step back on that. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cities that are recycling deserts and don't have curbside. They don't have access to curbside. There's cities where it's called subscription based, so it's not by default that you get it. Like you have to pay separately for it. I mean, most cities, like we're paying for it here because it's in the taxes, the general fund. So in some way we're paying for it. But, you know, in cities where it's a subscription, you have to do that extra step. You're going to have less people signing up, or people don't want to pay for it. And that can be highly inefficient. Like my friend in Minnesota, everyone, it's subscription. So you sign, you know, you find whoever you want to do it. So then on one street, you could have, you know, 5 different companies running routes, which is so inefficient.
Wow.
So hopefully getting more recycling laws out there where it's mandatory. It's not something you opt in on, and we have better collection systems and recycling systems that people understand and are paid for by producers somewhat.
Interesting. Anna, feel free to add.
Yeah, I would definitely, I agree with that. I would add that I see a lot of potential with reusables in New York City. So I go through the residential and corporate waste, what I call trash walks, and pull out usable things. And we just discard so many things that still have life in them that in other countries, it wouldn't be like this. In other countries where there's like serious material poverty, people would be using these, and like you wouldn't think to discard them like we do. So I would like to see the city take control of the reusable items or usable items that we discard. That means, like, I think it would be cool to pilot programs where maybe the Department of Sanitation starts picking up some of the smaller items. So if they find a bag of books, putting the bag of books somewhere in the truck, or if they find pots and pans or dish rack or ironing board or whatever, like if they could fit that somewhere in the truck and then centralize it, bring it to a warehouse, have people shop there. But I think reusables is a big frontier that like we've never actually tackled, and there's a lot of creative ways that we could do it. I also think the city needs to make it easier for move outs in general, because right now it is tough. I'm dealing with it with my friend's grandparents' house, where they're looking to give away furniture, and it's really difficult to find someone that will take it. And I think that's where the city could support people. And then with regards to organics, there's no timeline for it to be mandatory. And the program that's coming back this fall is going to be kind of on a rolling basis for only the locations that were serviced before. And then you have to sign up and try to get as many people in your neighborhood to sign up if you're not being serviced. And so I personally think that's a mistake. And I think that what we need to do is make it as soon as possible universal and mandatory, just like recycling, so that every single person in New York City has access to it. So I don't know, New York City, I don't think is leading in terms of a lot of things. I think Sarah's right. There's a lot of good, because of our recycling system, we do a really good job with recycling, actually, in terms of like sorting it and marketing it and keeping it as much, as much as we can domestic versus shipping it overseas. I think that's really positive. But we don't do a great job in terms of the capture rates. A lot of the stuff that is recyclable is going in the trash. We don't do a great job with organics. What we have is the food scrap drop-off sites right now. That's it. And for a city the size of New York City, when a third of our waste is organics, it just it doesn't make sense. It's definitely a part of the picture, but we need a lot more than that. So, and then the reusable. So I think that we could improve a lot in all those areas.
Yeah, no, definitely. The reusables is one of my favorite topics. Maybe some of participants, maybe yourself, you've heard of Stooping NYC or some other type of, social media platforms. And I'm always on it. I'm always either giving things away that I don't have any, purpose for anymore, as opposed to just putting on a landfill. And actually behind me is a kitchen island that I had found from the previous tenant. And I, made it was pretty beat up, and I painted it and stained it and reused it and given it new life. And now it's like brand new. As opposed to just throwing away that lumber, which is essentially what it would be. And that I think applies for a lot of different things. And I think with the composting, you're right, especially considering that this is a city where, we like have the top restaurants, and it's definitely very, food oriented city for either donation programs to not be mandated federally. The fact that we also have extreme high rate of homelessness, there should definitely be some sort of intersectional perspective on how to solve a lot of these problems. One can help the other. And I do know that Denmark, for example, with their composting waste to energy, they're definitely leading. Denmark, I think, is a pretty good example of a country, not necessarily a city. Copenhagen, it's a lot smaller, of course, but it is a pretty good model. Wonderful. Well, thank you both for your insight and your view, your personal view on what you think New York City is doing and if it's a model. We do have a couple of questions coming in from the audience, and I know that we were supposed to have a third participant who wasn't able to join today, just due to severe migraine. Horrible. I really hope she's doing well. But the question is, it's for both of you and whoever wants to answer. It says here, stores like Rite Aid, Staples, Key Food, etc. collect plastic bags for recycling. Do you think these drop-off sites can be trusted to actually recycle the bags? In addition, do you have any suggestions for places to drop off plastic bags for recycling?
I can go first. I would say overall, no. There's very little oversight on the programs, and when I go through their trash, I do see the plastic in it, so they're collecting it and then tossing it. I would say I've seen one of Whole Foods loading docks, and they actually have like designated area for plastic film. And I think that their program is actually probably better than like a CVS or a Key Foods or other place. So I would, if you were to drop off at any place, I actually would choose Whole Foods. I try to save them for my dog's waste. That's what I personally use them for. Maybe you want to see if like, one other thing is the Any Bag Project in New York City. It's stringing together these single-use plastic bags to make reusable bags. And I think that you can drop off with them. I'm not sure where, but if they're clean and dry, then they can reuse them and make them into new products.
What was that called? Sorry.
I think it's Any Bag New York. I'll put it in the chat.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll add to this that, yeah, like Anna said, contamination, I think, is a pretty big issue. I just dropped off, I keep plastic bags. I keep anything that had food contact in my freezer so bugs don't come, and anything that was dry, like from toilet paper, I put in the pantry, and then every like 3 weeks I drop it off at the grocery store. My confidence is not super strong, but it like pains me to just put it in the trash. So for now, I'll keep doing it. But yeah, most of the times it's different everywhere you go. That's the thing. But yeah, when I dropped it off this time, I think there was like a coffee maker in there and paper bags. So obviously it's pretty hard for a program to be successful with such high contamination rates. And I think that's the norm. That being said, I think that one of the end markets for that material stream, I believe, is products like plastic lumber. So that's a common kind of downcycling product right now, is this lumber that's made from plastic. So my understanding is that it does end up there. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are skeptical. I think that in some places it probably does work well, but I don't have a good grasp on under what parameters or conditions, the programs work. Because one time the grocery store near my old house that did collect them, I saw they had those plastic bags out with the regular trash, and I was enraged, and I think I spoke to the manager and was like, what's going on? But then later I couldn't tell if I was perhaps wrongfully understanding the situation, because it depends on the collection. Like some collections honestly will pick those things up in the same truck and then they'll get sorted later. So it's like it's almost impossible to really track the full life cycle and know. So I don't have a great answer to that question. I would say keep using them. And like Anna said, I didn't know that. It sounds like Whole Foods is the place to go for now.
Yeah, no, definitely. I too, I'm, a little bit skeptical sometimes and hesitant, but I definitely prefer to try than to not, and to just mix everything, at least separate them and keep questioning, keep asking, and keep attending events like this where, really, experienced people can share. And I see people sharing information here in the chat as well, apart from you two, which is great. I love that. So I want to see if there are any participants that want to ask a question directly, or maybe have something to comment. Maybe it's not a question; they just want to sort of express themselves.
I see Warren's got one about ever-ready batteries. Warren, do you mean just alkaline batteries? Well, if you do, alkaline batteries go in the trash, which I'm not an expert on batteries. It feels crazy to me to throw a battery in the trash because anything I throw in the trash, I just assume is going to end up in our water one day. Like, even though, modern landfills are built to last, I don't know. So anyway, I'm pretty sure alkaline batteries, they tell you to put in the trash. You're supposed to tape like when they end up in the recycling bin, they cause fires. That's like one of the number one problems in MRFs are plastic bags clogging machinery and batteries causing fires. But yeah, when you put them in the trash, I think you're supposed to tape the ends to reduce the chance of fire. And if
I've tried to take them to Staples and they refuse to take it.
Yeah, they're not considered toxic. So I just saw something about that because, the Department of Sanitation does their hazardous waste events where you can drop off paint and I forget other toxic items that should go in the regular landfill. And I think for batteries, I think the last thing I saw said they'll take them there, but you can just put them in the trash, which there might be, I hate to say that they can't be recycled because I feel like there's always some way most materials can be recycled, but whether it's like scalable and accessible as the issue. But yeah, for your regular consumer, I think they're trash.
So what should I do with them, if anything, right now?
You can keep searching. I mean, you could go on as e-waste warehouse. I think they're moving or have moved. You could email them and ask, but I think I had dropped a batch off there at one point. But again, it's like, are they just incinerating them or landfilling them, which is the same as you putting it in your trash, or do they actually have someone who can reprocess them? It's an open question. If you find out, let me know. If there's a great pie in the sky for those batteries, I would be surprised but happy to learn.
Right, because it's a shame that nothing seemingly can be done, at least nothing easily can be done.
Yeah, not to my knowledge. It's the other ones. What are the ones? There's take back programs for lithium, right? Those are the ones where it's
yes.
There's take back programs for those, and those should not go in the landfill. But alkaline, for now, goes in the trash.
If I can add to that, this is Paul Riel. I know that there are battery buckets. Of course, they cost money. You can drop something like $90 and you can get a large bucket shipped to your building. And then you can, have it there so that residents of the building could just toss their batteries in there. And then those get shipped back once the bucket is full, and then they're properly dealt with. At least that's the
right. And but it's always like, what is the properly dealt with?
Yeah. I know. I realize.
That's the unknown. Yeah, I'd be curious to know. Maybe they do have something they do with them, but it could just be that they're trying to prevent fires. I don't know.
Yeah.
Interesting. I have like a bucket of batteries that I've saved, and I'm also like, where am I going to take them? So now I'm just like, okay, maybe there's nowhere to take them to. So I should probably stop hoarding things.
I know, that's I do the same.
Yeah. We have another question that came in. If either of you want to take it, do you have any specific tips on getting companies comfortable with reusables? I imagine this participant maybe wants to talk to their own company. And the follow-up question to that was, do either of you do speaking engagements? So maybe to be invited to speak. I don't know, maybe this is one for Anna.
Sure. I think for the reusables, right? That's what was the question. Yeah. I think it depends on the industry and the sector that you're speaking about. I think in an office space, you could definitely talk with your office about reusables and dishwashing, because they need to go together. So maybe you need to install a dishwasher somewhere if you don't have it. And maybe, I mean, you need to figure out clearly like whose responsibility is it to load and unload it, and maybe it's a rotating schedule, maybe it's added to someone's job, whatever it is. I think if it's a restaurant, you could definitely talk to them about reusables and why it's important for you, or asking them. There's a New York City startup called Deliver Zero that does delivery in reusable containers, like maybe asking if they would consider signing up for that, joining that delivery platform. And for other reusables, like I saw someone comment about the school system, that's a huge issue. I think it could be done on maybe a school by school basis. I think it needs to be done within the larger system in general, just for the scope of it. There's over 1 million school students, and every day that they're in school, they're being served or given a disposable single-use paper or whatever type of material, plate, cup, fork, knife, spoon, all of that. So like that's 5 million single-use items per day. And that a lot of times other things come in this single-use disposable material. So maybe for the school, they pilot one day where they have reusable forks, and everything else is still single use, but they have reusable forks, and like then see how it goes. And do they have dishwashing capacity for it? Like that's, again, the dishwashing capacity is going to be an issue, and the labor is going to be an issue. Or maybe that, everyone brings their own bottle, and so you don't need single-use disposable cups anymore. That needs to be paired with water fountains. And like water refill stations and water testing. So it's a huge issue in schools that I think we do need to tackle, I hope sometime soon. So I would say, depending on the sector, tailor the message, recognize it's going to take labor, and that it's going to take systems, and it's going to take dishwashing or sanitizing for reusables to be used again and again. And yes, I do speak, depending on the venue or the type of thing. Like sometimes I ask for some compensation, sometimes I don't ask for compensation. But yeah, I am available.
Wonderful.
Thank you for answering that. Just to follow up, to give a little clarity, I work at a green school, and I've gotten my administration on board in regards to reusables, and I've also contacted Cup Zero, which will provide us a local washing service. So we are going to get these reusables, and we have this washing service. It's really getting school foods on board. And so we want to pilot this program. We're a charter, so we do have a little bit more leeway. And like I said, administration is on board. It's really getting school foods on board to allow us to serve their food on these reusables. And so I definitely feel like I got my work cut out for me in regards to my meeting with them. So I just wanted to speak to bring it up today because I'm pretty sure you have much more experience than myself in this area.
I would contact, there are two nonprofits to look into. One is called Cafeteria Culture. And they've also made a great documentary called Microplastic Madness, as an aside. That's really wonderful, and it's appropriate for school kids to watch. And then the other one is the Eco Schools program at NWF. So just, I would try to speak with them and let them know about this, and maybe they'd want to be involved in those conversations or in those pilots, because those are also good pilots for gathering data and then, replicating it other places.
Thank you so much.
I have a question for Louise, if I may. First of all, Louise, thank you so much for all the time that you put into putting together this event. I know it takes a lot of effort, so it's greatly appreciated. My question for you is this: you work in the solar industry, I believe, right?
Correct.
I read an article the other day that really left me troubled, where they talk about the pending tsunami in solar waste that is just around the corner. They're talking about 10 years out, where some people are calculating that there will be approximately about 6 million metric tons of new solar waste that will be generated every year. The writers calculated that to be about 260 million solar panels. And to put that in context, somebody was talking about that they were decommissioning a small solar farm in Texas where they had 13,000 solar panels. And it took them 24 truckloads in several days to decommission a mere 13,000 solar panels. What is your employer or others that you know of? What are they doing, if anything at all, about this tsunami of solar waste that is just around the corner when all these solar farms that were built 20 years ago come offline?
It's definitely a great question. And during my master's and my thesis, I focused heavily on the life cycle of copper specifically. And as we all know, or may not realize, we use copper in everything from our phones to switching on our lights, and wire especially is a big one. It's going to need to be recycled always. Now, in terms of, my employer or other solar companies, there are different methods. First of all, going back to some of the comments that were made by the other participants, speakers, policy. Many times when we're applying for permits or permits, part of the planning and zoning process, we need to include a decommissioning plan, or we don't receive that permit to build. So that is also starting to increase. We're seeing more and more townships forcing, and I think it's a good type of force, developers and installers to have a plan in place for the 15 to 25 years down the road when the system is no longer really in effect. In addition, personally, I've been sort of trying and doing a driving force with different recycling companies, either for the metal, for the racking, because that's another part that needs to be recycled, along with the wire, as I said, and the solar panels. I think one of the biggest challenges currently is the fact that it isn't a federal policy or even statewide, depending, and the cost is quite high. But kind of going back to, sort of the point that Anna was making, more people who are understanding of this, they're going to push policy in that direction. They're going to keep asking these questions. Recently, big corporations have been asked, how sustainable are their solar panels that they're using? The whole life cycle of it. So if people become more aware of life cycle, I do believe that change is going to happen. But I will not deny, Raul, that there's a lot to be done. And it's something that I think about a lot and sort of makes me feel like one step forward. Is it possibly 2 steps back? I'm not entirely sure. I'm not an expert, but it's definitely something I've thought about, sort of pivoting. And that's why, waste is and recycling is a sort of secret, not so secret passion of mine, because you know, building something is great, but what happens when it's no longer needed? And it's e-waste is huge. It's and the solution of shipping it off to places like Africa or Southern America, it's not going to fly anymore. So thank you for bringing that point up, and I will do my best to read more about it and see what I can push as well.
I just wanted to add to that too. I actually just got an email this afternoon. I'll put it in the chat in a second, but that Niagara County passed the nation's second solar panel producer responsibility law. So this is similar to the EPR, extended producer responsibility I was talking about that in my current role we try to do for packaging, and Maine just passed their first law. It sounds like I didn't know this until today, but it's the second producer responsibility law in the country, but I think it's just, the other one was Washington State, I believe, who tends to be pretty progressive on their policy as well. But an interesting company that I follow in this space, well, I guess it's not solar panels, but batteries, Redwood Materials. The company was started by, it's like the co-founder of Tesla, or he was the CTO. And maybe 5 years ago, they were kind of active, and now they're coming out a little bit more, but they're basically looking at battery recycling, which is going to be, you know, it already is a big thing, but I feel like that's going to be, you know, just like having clean water is going to be the oil for future generations, right? The resource that's dwindling that people need. And I think battery recycling is just going to be this huge thing in the future. So we'll see. But yeah, Redwood Materials, they're a cool one that I like to track.
Nice. I also shared We Recycle Solar, who I've worked with personally for some decommissioning on solar projects. Awesome. Are there any other questions? If not, might be a good place.
Can I just add one thing to that, Louise?
Of course, Paul. Of course you may.
So I just want to say that, you know, I'm really heartened to hear you say, Sarah, that Niagara, you know, places like Niagara are actually enforcing mandates on responsibly recycling or addressing the solar waste. But let's keep in mind that, you know, this is not a question of if we produce the solar, oh, there's going to be waste. It's not a question. I mean, the reality is that if we don't, we're going to be burning gas, right? I mean, so it's a you know, choose your poison kind of approach, and I would suggest that solar, even with some waste involved, is far less of an impact on the environment than if we just went ahead and continued to burn gas.
Right. I think that's an important point, but also I think it's important that, you know, the life cycle consideration is taken. I feel like previously in so many endeavors or products, whatever, companies didn't have to think about the life cycle of that product and what was going to happen to it. So yeah, I see your point. Like, you know, we need to look at the full life cycle. But yeah, if products are being put on the market, if there's some type of mandate where producers have to think about how that's going to be managed in the end, I think that's only good. Yeah, I guess that's all I'll say. I just think I'm glad to see that companies have to think about how things will be managed in the end.
Thank you.
I would add, Paul, if I may, that it's not that it's just some waste or a little waste. It's a tsunami of waste that is around the corner. The Harvard Business Review put out a really interesting article about it, maybe about a month ago or so. I think it was entitled "The Dark Side of Solar," and they go into some really deep analysis of how much waste they're talking about, and it's not a pretty picture, not a pretty picture at all.
And it's highly toxic. I mean, some of those elements in there are so rare. I mean, I think I could say rare, right? So we really, especially with solar panels, want to get some of that material back, as I understand. I'm not a solar specialist in any way, but yeah, I mean, I think all of us who love solar also want to see those panels get put back into use and have investments in recycling for those panels would just be the holy grail.
Yes, yes. And
no, definitely, they're definitely, you know, rare metals and they can be recycled. There are companies that exist. And to Paul's point, I agree. It should never be seen purely as a, well, solar's bad, so let's just stick to, our carbon that we keep burning. But to Sarah's point and to Raul's, it's definitely important to see the whole life cycle, to see what happens. Otherwise, if there are no regulations, any producer can make whatever type of solar panel with whatever type of materials. And as we're seeing now with plastic, when plastic was first created, it was a great idea, but there was not really a plan. And I think we should be, in the sustainability industry, learning from previous mistakes and not trying just to repeat the mistakes of other industries. Yeah. So I think I want to end it there. I really do appreciate this. Has been a great panel discussion, and we've all been able to kind of chat together as well. There have been a lot of different links posted, and I'm pretty sure that if you wanted to reach out to either Sarah or Anna on LinkedIn, I'm sure they'd be happy. As Sarah's posting her email there, so please, I urge you to reach out, connect with one another until we are able to meet, again in person, host this type of events. That would be great. LinkedIn is a great source, and that's how we find most of our speakers these days. So I really do want to thank both of you for accepting. Both brought a lot of insight. You definitely, made my afternoon after being tired of work all day. It's quite refreshing to have these sort of conversations.
I want to say thank you to Louise and thank you to Anna too. This has been really interesting to learn, and thanks for everyone who attended. Yeah, it's nice to be here with everyone, even though we didn't see your faces, and I hope everyone's doing well under these crazy times and enjoying your summer.
Definitely appreciate that.
Really appreciate it so much.
Posted a couple of links for Green Home, including the next event, which will be next Wednesday, forum led. Should be, an interesting event. It's focused on material shortages. So pretty close, pretty similar to what we're talking about now, but from the other side, it'll be forums. So it'll be a little more in depth, less about personal experiences. So would love to see you guys all there. If not, please share, so maybe someone in your network who is interested can learn a few things. All right. Have a lovely evening.
Good night.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.